Hey, welcome back everyone. We are on 7.0 on the Blueprint Outlines, and this is on Pharmacy Inventory Management. Pharmacy Inventory Management. So inventory, every pharmacy has to have inventory. Inventory refers to the quantity of medication on hand in the pharmacy at any given time. Inventory management focuses on the procurement, drug storage, and inventory control, repackaging and label considerations, distribution systems, and recapture and disposal of used and unused pharmaceutical products. 7.1, function and application of NDC, lot numbers and expiration dates. I know we're going to go over this NDC again, but A, purpose of inventory management. 1, it provides adequate stock of pharmaceuticals and supplies to be able to be dispensed to the patient. 2, it reduces unexpected stock outs and temporary shortages which may affect patient care. 3, it reduces carrying costs or financial investment in drug products, because drugs are really expensive. These pharma companies, I don't know, some of them are crooked, but they make a lot of money, and so some drugs cost you $20,000 or $30,000 just for a bottle. So, but with inventory control, you can reduce some carrying costs. 4, it minimizes costs associated with placing orders to the wholesaler. 5, it minimizes time spent on purchasing functions. 6, it minimizes capital charge on average inventory. 7, it minimizes shrinkage, in other words, drugs that go missing for whatever reason, breakage, and obsolescence of inventory. Obsolescence means that the drug becomes obsolete for whatever reason. Drugs do become obsolete because they get replaced by better drugs. 8, reduces purchasing dollars spent by selecting products based on organizational formulary requirements, bioequivalence, and cost. Now, I just want to talk a little bit about how drugs come into the pharmacy. So if you're a retail pharmacy or hospital, they have what's called wholesalers. And these wholesalers are distributors. So, and you buy drugs at the wholesale price. Remember average wholesale price? And there are a few big distributors in the United States. McKesson is one. There's McKesson, there's Cardinal Health, there's Bergen. Those are the big three. And then so these pharmacies will order their drugs on a daily basis from their wholesaler, and then the drugs come in and then they add it to their inventory. Another way that pharmacies get their inventory is they buy directly from the manufacturer. There are some drugs that you can just buy directly from them, and these are usually big chains, or they could be a generic house. Another way is if you're a chain pharmacy, you act as a distributor. So most chain pharmacies are not a complete distributor. They all use McKesson or Bergen or Cardinal in some way. And then they also house their own drugs. Like they're their own wholesaler. They have their own drug warehouse. And so they'll deliver drugs to their pharmacies maybe 2 or 3 times a week. And then the pharmacies will pick up all the things that they need, things that their own warehouse doesn't carry. They'll order those on a daily basis through their primary wholesaler. And some pharmacies use more than one wholesaler. They may use 2 or 3 wholesalers, because some wholesalers may be out of something and then their secondary wholesaler may carry it. Okay, so I just want to give you a quick overview of how drugs come into the pharmacy, how they order it. Okay, so B is the NDC, or right the center, type it in, you know it already, National Drug Code. National Drug Code. So 1, as described earlier, the NDC is a product identifier for human drugs in the United States. You don't usually see NDC drugs on veterinary drugs. At least I haven't, but maybe they do. It is a unique 11-digit 3-segment number, and the code is present on all non-prescription, OTC or over-the-counter, and legend or prescription medication packages. Remember, legend is the same thing as prescription drugs. And also inserts in the United States. Let's go to page 2. A. So the 3-segment format, again, we're reviewing this, is 5, 4, and 2. It's 5 digits, 4 digits, and 2 digits. An example is 0777-3105-02. The first segment is the labeler or manufacturer. The second segment is the product code and strength. And the third segment is the package code as defined by the manufacturer. So again, remember I said earlier 0777, that's always going to be the same manufacturer. And then 3105 is that manufacturer's product strength and ID for that drug. And then 02 will be their package size as identified by the manufacturer. Okay, another truck going by. B, remember that if you are inputting the NDC into the computer system and the packaging only has 10 digits or 9 digits, you must place leading zeros when necessary in order for the system to recognize the NDC number correctly. So you always have to put in the format of 5, 4, and 2 when you're going to adjudicate the NDC online to the insurance company. C, always pull drugs from the shelf and then check the NDC numbers with the labels when filling the prescription. And then there's also the barcode too, that you can scan the bottle, make sure that you pull the correct bottle. And also you do the same with making IV admixtures, CSPs, or compounding. C, lot numbers. So a lot number is an identification number assigned to a particular quantity or lot or batch of a drug that is manufactured. So all manufacturers have to put lot numbers on their drugs when they manufacture it. Lot numbers typically can be found on the outside of the packaging, like on the outside of the bottles or a box, tubes, bags, unique packaging such as birth control pills, and eye and ear drops, and inhalers. 2, the primary reason, again, for lot numbers is to identify the drug, the lots or the batches of drugs made by the manufacturer that may cause adverse effects or a worst case scenario, which is death to the consumer. So they would be able to recall it, they would identify which lot numbers are affected, and then they would send that down ultimately to the pharmacy. And so then the pharmacy can then recall those lot numbers of the drugs that they dispense to the patient. 3, lot numbers allow the manufacturer to identify the batches that were affected so that they can immediately release the drug recall to the wholesalers, pharmacies, and patients or consumers. D, expiration date. Page 3 above. 1, all manufactured drugs in the United States have expiration dates. Some exceptions, which are not drugs, may be supplements like herbal supplements like lactobacillus or vitamins. The expiration date is assigned by the manufacturer and ensure the amount of time a product will be pure, safe, and effective, safety and efficacy for use by the patient. 2, if the date is only the month and year format, such as 0122, it is assumed that the drug is good till the blank, write it in or type it in, last day of the month. It is assumed that it's good till the last day of the month. So it would be which would mean in the case of 122, if it's just the month and the year 0122, then it's assumed that it's good till 01/31/22, the last day of the month. If it's February, there's only 28 days in February, so if it said 02/22, then the last day that the drug is good for is 02/28/22. Okay, got that? So sometimes though, the manufacturer will actually use a specific day on the packaging, such as 01/15/22. If that's the case, you don't have to assume that it's the last day of the month. The 15th day in this situation is the last day that the drug can be used. A, in skilled nursing pharmacies, the default expiration date when packaging unit dose blister packs is 1 year if the manufacturer's expiration date is greater than 1 year. So they use 1 year, and actually retail pharmacies will use 1 year too, if the manufacturer's expiration date is greater than 1 year. So if the manufacturer's date is less than a year away, then you must use that date instead of 1 year. That's pretty obvious, right? So if it's going to expire in 6 months, you have to use that date that it's going to expire in 6 months. For example, the manufacturer's expiration date is 8/21, and today's date is 7/9/19. So the expiration date would be 7/20. Okay? We're doing it for 1 year, even though the manufacturer's expiration date is greater than 1 year. If the manufacturer's expiration date is 12/19 and today's date is 7/9/19, then you must use 12/19 because you can't use 7/20 because the bottle is going to expire on 12/19, which is before July 2020. So in other words, whichever comes first, 1 year or the manufacturer's expiration date. 3, beyond use dating, we've talked about this, the bud. A bud is assigned by the pharmacy when repackaging or compounding a medication. So you would look at the example 2A above. There are 2 possible methods, 6-month and 1-year methods. The 6-month method is either 6 months or 1/4 of the manufacturer's expiration date. The 1-year method is a maximum of 1 year as long as it does not exceed the expiration date of the manufacturer. The BUD for sterile compounding medications do not follow this method because of the USP 797 requirements. Okay, 4, rotating stock. Let's go to page 4. Rotating stock. A, we're on page 4. When receiving new drug inventory from the wholesaler or the manufacturer, if you order direct, it is a good common practice to rotate stock on the pharmacy shelves for the same exact drug product. So older bottles with sooner to expire expiration dates should be rotated to the front with the new later expiration stock placed to the rear. So that just makes sense, right? Let's say you have 2 drugs and they're exactly the same drug. Now these aren't here, but let's say they're exactly the same. And you just ordered a brand new drug. This drug's sitting on the shelf and you just ordered a brand new one. And then the brand new one has a later expiration date. You don't want to stick it in front because this drug is going to expire first. Good practice is to rotate it behind. This may be a question on the exam, so know this best practice. Always put the later expired drugs behind the one that's going to expire first because you want to get rid of the one that's going to expire first. You want to get rid of it. And then this also minimizes drug expiration of products, thus preventing capital loss to the pharmacy. If the drug expires, you can't use it, right? You lose all that money, and you're going to try and get the manufacturer to reimburse you for some of it. 7.2, formulary or approved preferred product list. A, the formulary definition. So a drug formulary is a list of prescription drugs, both brand, proprietary, and generic, used by practitioners, hospitals, HMOs, such as Kaiser or like Blue Cross, and prescription insurance companies or third parties to identify drugs that offer the greatest overall value. A committee such as the P&T Committee, the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee, which is comprised of physicians, pharmacists, nurse practitioners, and physician's assistants, create and maintain the formulary. So that's the formulary definition, right? This is a list of drugs. The drugs are chosen for their cost, safety, and effectiveness or efficacy. So that is the formulary definition, okay? A drug formulary is a list of prescription drugs, both brand, proprietary, and generic, used by practitioners, hospitals, insurance companies, and that's the if that drug is on that formulary, that's the only drug that they're going to pay for. Because if you remember, formulary drugs, there's lots of drugs that will treat the same disease state, and so what you want is what insurance companies want is they don't want to pay for all these different drugs that are used for the same disease state. They only want to pay for 1 and 2. Most likely, they want to pay for the cheapest one. And so that would be on their drug formulary as determined by the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee. Every hospital has their own Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee, and every insurance company has their own Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee. These are powerful committees because they can dictate what they want to pay for. And so drug companies try and influence Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committees as much as they can because they want their drug to be on the formulary so they can sell drugs. 1, there are many drugs within a drug classification that exhibit the same pharmacological action on the body. Formularies are created in order to minimize the myriad of drugs used for the same disease state and to manage costs for the bureaucracy using the formulary. The bureaucracy in this case would be the hospital or the insurance company. B, types of formularies. So know these. An open formulary. This is where all pharmaceutical products are carried, which is almost impossible because there's just too many drugs. 2, a closed formulary. This is what most hospitals and insurance companies use. This is a limited number of products of each drug classification covered, and this is what most insurance companies use, and that's why they're closed. Then 3, there's a restricted formulary. So this is a hybrid of both open and closed formularies. They'll use non-formulary drugs in certain cases, so they call it a restricted formulary. That's page 5. So what is a drug tier? With regards to prescription insurance, you only have to worry about this for retail prescription insurance. The tier that the patient's medication is in, the tier that the patient's medication is in, determines their portion of the drug cost. In other words, it determines their portion that they pay. A typical drug benefit includes 3 or 4 tiers. So tier 1 usually includes generics. They're always going to pay for the generic medication because it's the cheapest, and the patient will have the lowest copay when they use a generic drug. Tier 2 usually includes a preferred brand name drug. So there may be like 3 different brand names for drugs that treat the same disease state, but the insurance company will only pay for one of those preferred brands. And it's usually because there's something hokey pokey going on under the table. They're getting some kind of a rebate from that manufacturer. And then tier 3 usually includes non-preferred brand name medications. So tier 2 and tier 3, the patient is going to have a higher copay than tier 1, which is just the generic. So an example would be like they'll pay $10 for the generic, but they'll pay $25 for a preferred brand name, tier 2. And if it's not a preferred brand name, they may pay $50 for a tier 3 drug. Or there might not even be a tier 3 in their insurance. They may just have to pay cash if the insurance wants that particular brand. D, why does a formulary matter in retail or hospital pharmacies? So for large HMOs like a Kaiser Foundation or Blue Cross Blue Shield, their pharmacies only stock their approved formularies. So in retail, though, it is impractical to carry a defined formulary because there are hundreds of drug plans that the pharmacy must service. So you can't have a closed formulary for a retail pharmacy because retail pharmacies take hundreds of drug plans. And every drug plan has their own formulary, right? So for a pharmacy, it has to carry everything as much as possible. And therefore, inventory is really expensive for retail pharmacies and hospital pharmacies. But in hospital pharmacies, remember, they usually have a closed formulary. So therefore, retail pharmacies have open inventories and are not dictated by a strict formulary. 7.3, ordering and receiving processes. So these are, for example, maintaining par levels and then rotating your stock. A, procurement considerations. 1, so procurement includes drug selection, source selection, cost analysis, group purchasing, prime vendor relationships, purchasing procedures, record keeping, and receiving controls. A, drug selection includes a cost analysis, in other words, a cost per dose, per day, or cost per treatment. And by the way, procurement again means how you procure the drug, how you obtain the drug for the pharmacy. B, source selection decides whether a generic or brand name drug is to be purchased. It examines the therapeutic equivalency of the products. Consideration of product is influenced by the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. Please type that in or write it in. ASHP stands for American Society of Health System Pharmacists. It used to stand for American Society of Hospital Pharmacists, but don't type that in because now it stands for American Society of Health System Pharmacists. So consideration of product is influenced by the ASHP guidelines for selecting pharmaceutical manufacturers and supplies. Let's go to page 6 on the top. C, cost analysis. This is the examination of acquisition and storage costs and the costs associated with the time required to prepare or package a drug. D, group packaging organizations allow hospitals and retail pharmacies to purchase medications at a lower cost based on volume. So these organizations negotiate prices but do not make purchases for an institution. So basically these are just organizations. So let's say you're a retail independent pharmacy. You're not a chain. You don't have the buying power of a chain because they have thousands of pharmacies. You're just this little independent pharmacy. You may own only 1 or 2 or 3 pharmacies. Well, so what you want to do is you want to get into these buying co-ops or these group purchasing organizations. And so what happens is a bunch of independent pharmacies will get together and join one of these organizations, and they in turn, that determines your buying power. That makes buying power for you, right? These organizations will then go to the manufacturers and say, look, I represent 300 independent pharmacies, and so I want a discount for my pharmacies that I represent when they buy your drug. Okay, E, a primary or prime vendor is one source, a wholesaler from which as many products as possible are purchased. So like I was saying earlier, if you're a retail pharmacy, you're going to have a prime vendor, your main wholesaler, McKesson, Cardinal, Bergen, whoever it is. Amerisource, that's another one just came to my mind. F, purchasing procedures include negotiating discounts and establishing payment schedules, terms of payment, prepayment policies, non-performance penalties, and return and damaged goods policies. Records must be maintained to meet governmental regulations, standards of practice requirements, accreditation standards, and accreditation standards are only associated with hospitals. Policies and management information requirements. Records may include purchase orders that authorize the purchase of a product. H, receiving procedures include shipments, invoices, and purchase orders that must be reconciled by item. So quantity and strength of each item must be checked off. The prices on the invoice should correspond to the price that has been negotiated, especially if you're in one of these buying purchasing groups. And discrepancies must be addressed promptly with the pharmacist and the vendor. So it's common. You get a bunch of drugs that come in the next day from the wholesaler, and all of a sudden you get a short. The bottle that you're being billed for on the invoice isn't in the tote. So the pharmacist has to call the wholesaler and say, hey, I didn't get this. And they'll check their inventory and they'll see that, oh yeah, I guess we didn't get it. So they'll either give you a credit or they'll ship the drug to you the next day. B, ordering and receiving drugs from wholesalers and drug manufacturers. 1, pharmacists order their inventories from a combination of wholesalers and manufacturers, with about 90% of their inventories coming directly from their prime vendor or primary wholesaler. Okay, let's go to page 7 above. Let me take a sip of water. Okay, a drug wholesaler stocks inventories of drugs from several drug manufacturers. Could be up to like 1,000. And then sells that inventory to pharmacies. Wholesaler distribution means distribution of prescription drugs to persons other than a consumer or patient, but does not include the sale, purchase, or trade of a drug, or an offer to sell, purchase, or trade a drug for emergency medical reasons. Pharmacists are able to purchase when they need a product rather than far in advance. So it's kind of like just-in-time inventory, right? JIT. They just order it when they need it. They can get it the next day. So if they're short on a drug, if the prescription comes in from the patient and they don't have it at all, they can order it and it will come in the next day. Or the patient will have an option to maybe go find another pharmacy that may have the drug. Or maybe there's just enough to fill it for a few days. They only have just a few tablets. And they can do that. They can give the patient a few tablets to carry them over until they get the drug the next day or whenever the patient can come in next. B, wholesalers may include special services to the pharmacy, such as emergency deliveries, weekend deliveries, automated ordering systems, automated purchasing systems that include a computer or internet-based ordering systems, barcoded shelf labels, recalls, pricing updates, and purchasing history reports. So these are all the extra special services that wholesalers should offer their pharmacies because they're selling all these drugs, and these should really be value-added services that they give to their customer. The retail pharmacy is their customer. C, state boards of pharmacy license the drug wholesalers. State boards of pharmacy. So if you're one of these major wholesalers, you have to get a wholesale license from every single state that you do business. If you do business in all 50 states, you got to get a wholesaler license from all 50 state boards of pharmacy. D, large drug wholesalers in the country include McKesson, AmerisourceBergen, Cardinal Health, Owens & Minor, Henry Schein, and H.D. Smith. They may ask you a question like, what is the example of a large drug wholesaler? Most likely the answer that they're going to give you are like McKesson or Cardinal or AmerisourceBergen. Owens & Minor, Henry Schein, and H.D. Smith are not as large as the first big three. 2, drug manufacturers allow pharmacies to purchase bulk directly from them, resulting in a savings for the pharmacy. But not all manufacturers allow direct purchasing for the pharmacy. 3, receiving processes. So A, you want to verify the incoming merchandise, the drug, the dosage form, the strength, the package size, the number of units, and the expiration dates. You want to make sure you're not getting a drug bottle from the wholesaler that has either been expired or has a short date, like it's going to expire in 3 months. You don't want to keep something like that on the shelf. Against the packing slip or the invoice. So usually the pharmacy technician's job is this. They're going to verify, they're going to procure the drugs that are coming in, they're going to verify the invoice with what's actually in the tote, in the wholesaler's tote. The only thing that they can't verify is controlled C2 drugs. They can do C3, 4, and 5, but they cannot inventory or receive C2 drugs. Only the pharmacist can do that. B, hazardous substances must be handled by trained personnel wearing protective equipment, PPE. C, any inventory appearing to be damaged or out of date should be noted on the packing slip and then the vendor contacted immediately. Okay, page 8, top. D, any merchandise requiring special storage such as refrigeration should promptly be verified and placed in proper conditions to avoid damage or loss of potency. So like for instance insulins. E, sign and date the invoice or packing slip. F, forward documentation to accounts payable if you're like a chain pharmacy. G, place the merchandise on the shelf, and then remember to rotate the products. The newer bottle with the later expiration date is going to be put behind the older bottle with the oldest expiration date. And so rotate product by placing product with the shortest dating on the front and the longest dating behind it. Be aware again of look-alike, sound-alike drugs, misleading product labels, and product storage when placing products into the pharmacy inventory. 8. Retain appropriate paperwork in the pharmacy as outlined in the Controlled Substances Act, Occupational Safety and Health Administration requirements, or the institution's policies and procedures manual. So again, Controlled Substances Act, OSHA, or the institution's policies and procedures manual. C, PAR. What does that mean? Type it in or write it in. Periodic automatic replacement. PAR. PAR values. Periodic automatic replacement. So 1, PAR levels are levels set by the pharmacy, usually the pharmacy manager. That is the minimum amount that should be available at any time for a drug item to be dispensed. When an item falls below the PAR, the periodic automatic replacement, it is replenished immediately. So it sounds simple in principle, but to bring an item to PAR involves cycle counting or actually a physical inventory, which is a huge investment in time. So that's why your pharmacy system should be, if it's accurate, should be maintaining or managing these PAR levels, because it has a number of tablets or capsules or whatever it is for each NDC that you dispense. And so when you bring in items, it'll add to that inventory. And when you dispense items or items that are recalled or expired, it takes it out of inventory, right? So, but in real practice, I've never seen 100% accurate inventory in any pharmacy. It's just a moving target. It keeps moving in and out. So then the technician is usually responsible for cycle counting in a pharmacy. 2, in an automatic reordering system, when a drug falls below the PAR, it is automatically reordered. That's in the best perfect world that would happen. D, the 80-20 rule. There's 80-20 rules for everything in life, right? 80% of a pharmacy's drug costs are derived from 20% of the drugs carried. So you want to focus on inventory control of the top 20% of the items carried. And usually every pharmacy has their top 100 or top 200 bay or shelf. They have it in one area in the pharmacy. Usually it's close to the workbench where they can just turn around and grab that top 100 or 200 drug. Or if you have a Script Pro, one of those robotic machines like Rite Aid Script Pro, they have the top 100 or 200 drugs in their robot. Let's go to 9. Inventory turnover rate. So this is the cost of goods sold. This is the cost of goods sold, or COGS, over the average inventory value. So the greater the number of inventory turns indicates better utilization of financial resources of an institution or business. That's the inventory turnover rate. You want to get a turnover rate of between 5 and 7. Your inventory turns over that many times in a year. That shows that your inventory is efficient, that you're constantly turning it over. You don't have a lot of dead products in the pharmacy. F, rotation of stock. So rotation of stock is as described above in 7.1.D.3. Rotation of stock should be automatically done when receiving new drug inventory into the pharmacy to avoid loss of value of inventory. Rotation is managed by rotating the soonest expiring date of the drug to the front or moving it to the newer inventory, the later expiration date to the rear. Okay, we've covered this several times already. Hey, let me say something about cost of goods in E above. So you're going to learn about cost of goods in the math pharmaceutical calculations. That comes under business math. G, unit dose systems. These are usually used by skilled nursing pharmacies. A unit dose system is a system that provides a medication in its final unit of use. Unit dose packaging machines may be manual, semi-automatic, or automatic. Sometimes they're also called blister packs. And each tablet or capsule is in a single cell blister. So each cell has one tablet. Sometimes it has two, if the directions say take 2 capsules or 2 tablets. On a card with usually 30 cells per card. A modified unit dose is a drug distribution system that combines unit dose medications, which are blister packaged onto a multiple dose card instead of being placed in a box, and synonymously with like punch cards or bingo cards and blister cards. We showed you pictures of one of the PowerPoint lectures of an automated robotic machine that does unit dose blister packs, and that was called the Dosis machine. All right, slide 10. H, investigational new drugs. These are investigational drugs. So these drugs are dispensed for a controlled study only, which is sponsored usually by a drug manufacturer, institution, or agency. The FDA may allow dispensing of a particular drug for a particular situation when all other methods of treatment have been exhausted. The P&T committee then will ask the pharmacy to maintain administrative control over the clinical investigation. Duties of the hospital pharmacy include the following: distribution and control of the investigational drug, clinical services, research activities, and clinical study management. Now, you usually don't see investigational new drugs in a retail setting. These are usually in a controlled environment like in a hospital. 1. The drug approval process. So an investigational drug is one that is under study, as in clinical trials, but does not have the permission yet from the FDA to be legally marketed and distributed and sold in the United States. Clinical research is conducted by pharmaceutical and biotech companies, as well as federal agencies like the National Institutes of Health, the NIH. They get funded by our tax dollars. And the National Cancer Institute, NCI, which are cooperative research groups and individual investigators. The NCI is also funded by taxpayer dollars. Preclinical studies are performed on animals to help establish boundaries of safety when human testing begins. I know that there's some animal lovers there. There's people who protest against this, but it's a fact of life. An investigational new drug application, INDA, is submitted to request permission to begin human testing. This is not an application for approval, though. This is an investigational new drug app. So here are the phases for an NDA for clinical studies. Phase 1, you've got to know these phases. It determines the appropriate dose range with regard to safety and toxicity. It's conducted with just a small group of individuals or patients, like around 20 to 80 of healthy individuals, and the study phase is like 9 to 18 months in length. Phase 2 is they take a larger population and it's performed on 100 to 300 patients who actually have the disease that they're studying, that the drug is for, or the condition to be treated. And it often involves hospitalized patients for close monitoring. Let's go to page 11. You also in phase 2 have preliminary evaluation of safety and efficacy, and it may focus on dose response in the dosing schedule, like how many times a day this drug should be taken. Phase 3, this is conducted in a yet larger population, usually several hundred to several thousand patients in groups for which the medication is ultimately going to be used for or intended for. One, comparisons between new treatment and standard therapy or placebo. Remember, placebo is it's something that's not even used. There's no, it's an inactive ingredient. And the medication is used in the manner in which it will be used after approval. And this may take 2 to 5 years to complete. Phase 4 then is the post-marketing evaluation. And then after you go through the investigation on new drug application, then you can apply for the NDA, the new drug application. And this is the application to the FDA for marketing approval. So now you can see why it takes so long and how much drug companies spend for their research and development, R&D, when they're going through all these phases, phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. It takes years. And so by the time they can actually bring it to market, and sometimes that the drug is, it fails. It fails the clinical trials, and so they spent all this money and they can't even bring the drug to market. I will tell you this though, there's a scam going on here, and that the NIH, the National Institutes of Health, and the National Cancer Institute often will do a lot of the research and development for the drugs which were paid with American taxpayer money, and then they'll auction it off to the big pharma company that wants to add that to their stable of drugs. So a lot of the R&D has already been taken out with taxpayer money, and then they finish off the R&D, and then they proceed to rip off the American public, charging these incredible prices for prescription drugs, for brand new drugs. All right, so let's go back to the new drug application. So application to the FDA for marketing approval. It's submitted after the clinical trials are completed and the sponsor believes that there is adequate data to support safety and effectiveness or efficacy. And then they get the FDA indication. So for a very specific disease or cause of a specific disease, the sponsor must label with the package insert only for that specific indication. It limits what the sponsor can promote the drug for. So they can't promote off-label uses. It's illegal. They have to only promote it, or they can only promote it for the indication that they applied for, that the FDA approved. Okay, 7.4, storage requirements. Like in the refrigerator, does it go to the freezer? In a warmer area, does it have to be secure? So A, drugs have different storage requirements and are usually defined by the drug manufacturer. These include room temperature. This is the majority of drugs are stored at room temperature in the pharmacy. And room temperature is defined as 59 degrees Fahrenheit or 15 degrees centigrade to 86 degrees Fahrenheit or 30 degrees centigrade. So please know that range. Room temperature is 15 to 30 degrees centigrade or 59 to 86 degrees Fahrenheit. That could be a test question. 2, refrigerated temperature is cold temperature, right? These are drugs stored at refrigeration, like insulin and some vaccines. So the temperatures should be in the range of 35 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 degrees centigrade to 46 degrees Fahrenheit or 8 degrees centigrade. So on the answer on the question, if you get asked what is refrigerated temperature, it should be 2 to 8 degrees centigrade or 35 to 46 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, let's go to page 12. A, so typical drugs that should be refrigerated are insulin, vaccines, reconstituted antibiotics, interferon, Caverject, gabapentin suspension, and several others. Freezer temps, Here, the temperature is maintained between minus 25 degrees and minus 10 degrees, or centigrade. Centigrade. So minus 25 degrees and minus 10 degrees, or minus 13 degrees and 14 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so the formula for converting Fahrenheit to centigrade, this is in your math section, but we'll just cover it here, and centigrade to Fahrenheit, back and forth, Fahrenheit to centigrade, centigrade to Fahrenheit. So from Fahrenheit to centigrade, it's Fahrenheit minus 32 times 5 over 9, and that gives you centigrade. For centigrade to Fahrenheit, it's centigrade times 9 over 5 plus 32, and that gives you your Fahrenheit. Again, you'll have a opportunity to practice this in the math section, but you must remember these two formulas. Warm temperature, so this is any temperature between 86 degrees Fahrenheit and 30 degrees centigrade, and 104 degrees Fahrenheit and 40 degrees centigrade. There are no known drugs that require storage in warm temperature. All right, that's all I need to say about that, because drugs are degraded in warm temperature. B, pharmacy security. So all pharmacies are required to have a workable alarm service when the pharmacy is closed. This is in all pharmacies in all states. Closed circuit televisions and hold-up alarm buttons may be installed, although those are options, but such installation is at the discretion of the institution. 3, each facility will have established policies and procedures to ensure the safety of staff, customers, and property. And these policies should be published in the Policies and Procedures Manual of the pharmacy. 4, facilities may provide lockers for employees' belongings in a secure area. 5, keys may be required to be signed out from a secure location to gain access to the pharmacy. And keys can also be stored in a lockbox. Usually, if it's it'll be the pharmacist that gets the key to the lockbox to open up the pharmacy, especially if they're a relief pharmacist. 6, motion detectors must be installed and in working condition. And 7, only licensed pharmacists may dispense a prescription and supervise pharmacy technicians. Let's go to page 13, number 8 above. Only pharmacists or designated employees will have access to keys to open or close the pharmacist. Never ever should a pharmacy technician have the keys to open up a pharmacy. That's illegal. 9, security requirements that restrict access to medications to authorized personnel only are in place because of legal and institutional standards and standards of practice. So this could be like Schedule II drugs. They have to be locked up in a safe, and so only a pharmacist would have access to that. Or if it's in a bigger pharmacy, like in a hospital with skilled nursing facilities, those controlled drugs will be in a cage, an enclosed cage, and then inside the cage will actually be locked up cabinets. 10, touchpads and scannable fingerprints and retina identification. These are means of identification which may be used for employees to gain access to a particular area. All right, 7.5, removal of drugs, which include drug recalls, returns, outdates, expired goods, and reverse distribution. These topics have already been discussed in earlier sections, and so we'll just review them quickly. Recalls. So drug recalls are executed by the drug manufacturer or the FDA. Common causes include drug packaging mislabeling, drug contamination, lack of potency, or lack of good manufacturing practice, otherwise known as GMP. At the pharmacy level, it's usually the pharmacy technician that removes the identified drug and then lot numbers that are associated with the drug recall. And then again, there are 3 classes of drug recalls, if you remember, class 1, 2, and 3. Class 1, again, there's a reasonable probability that the use of the product will cause or lead to serious adverse effects or even death. Class 2 is a probability exists that use of the product will cause adverse health events that are temporarily or medically reversible. And Class 3 are use of the product will probably not cause an adverse health event. B, recalled medication processes. Let's go to page 14. So the pharmacy is notified by the manufacturer or wholesaler by email, fax, or regular mail of the reason of the recall. The information contained in a recall notice includes the drug manufacturer's name, the drug name, the strength, the package size, the lot or batch number, and the expiration date so that you can go to the shelf and identify it. The pharmacy determines if the recalled medication is currently in stock. The pharmacy contacts the patients who may have received the medication because you'll be able to do a report via their computer system. If a customer has the recalled product, the medication should be returned to the pharmacy for a refund or substitution. 4, the pharmacy follows disposition directions from the drug manufacturer. 5, recalled medication is returned to the manufacturer for credit. 6, medication that has been recalled is reordered. Notify the physician of the recalled medication. Inquire if the physician wishes to change the medication order, especially if the product may not be available for a long period of time as a result of the recall. 2, returns. Drug returns are usually drugs that are in date and returned for credit to the manufacturer or wholesaler. So we kind of distinguish just returns from outdates. 3, outdates. So these are expired medications or outdated returns in which the expiration date has been reached and is beyond use, and therefore you can't even sell it or dispense it to the patient. Policies are established by each pharmacy regarding the process of pulling medications, which is published in their P&P, their Policies and Procedures Manual. Pulling medications that will expire within a given period. So most pharmacies now use a reverse distribution service for outdated drug inventory. For reverse distribution, so these are usually companies who take back and process the pharmacy's expired goods from the pharmacies and return them to the corresponding manufacturer, and then they usually charge a 20 to 30% upcharge or processing fee. All right, page 15, last page, A. The DEA now has a definition of a reverse distributor, which is a new category of registrant for a person or company handling controlled substances that are unwanted, unusable, or outdated controlled substances acquired from another DEA registrant, such as a pharmacy or wholesaler. These standards ensure the proper documentation and record keeping necessary to prevent diversion of such controlled substances for illegal purposes. So now even reverse distributors, such as RDS, which is actually a company, Reverse Distribution Services, they have to actually get a DEA license because they're going to be handling controlled drugs, and the DEA wants to know that there is a chain of custody for those drugs and it doesn't go into the wrong hands and end up getting sold in the street. And then finally, the DEA must be notified at least 2 weeks before the destruction of controlled substances, remember, through the issue of Form 41 for expired controlled substances. A copy of Form 41 must be maintained for a minimum of 2 years by the pharmacy after the destruction of controlled substances. The destruction of medications must follow all local, state, and federal guidelines involving environmental issues such as burning, flushing, and rinsing. Okay, that, guys, then is the end, ladies and gentlemen, guys and ladies, peeps, my peeps. That ends 7.0 Pharmacy Inventory Management of the Blueprint, and we will see you in 8.0. Good job.